Do you remember eating at Sambo's in 1982? Maybe Wienerwald? You probably don't, because they all vanished. In 1982, America's biggest restaurant chains collapsed overnight. Bankruptcy. Scandal. 30 beloved chains disappeared throughout the 1980s. Most people never knew why. The scandals were buried. Let's uncover what really killed America's favorite restaurants. Sambo's was America's breakfast king. By 1981, the chain operated 1,117 locations across 47 states, serving pancakes, coffee, and comfort food to millions of families every week. The name came from founders Sam Battistone and Newell Bonnet. Sam plus Bo equals Sambo's. But the name was identical to the racist children's book, Little Black Sambo, and by the late 1970s, civil rights groups launched nationwide protests and boycotts. The controversy destroyed the brand's reputation. In November 1981, Sambo's filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy and immediately closed 447 restaurants in a single day, laying off 10,000 employees overnight. The company attempted to rebrand remaining locations as Seasons-Friendly Eating in 1982, but the damage was irreversible. By the end of 1982, all locations except the original Santa Barbara restaurant had closed permanently. The chain that once dominated American breakfast vanished in less than 2 years. Wienerwald was a Swiss-German rotisserie chicken chain that exploded across America in the 1970s. By 1978, the company operated 1,600 restaurants worldwide, positioning itself as a fast casual dining empire. But aggressive overexpansion and mounting debt created a financial crisis. In 1982, Wienerwald filed for bankruptcy and closed 800 U.S. locations almost immediately, leaving thousands unemployed and communities without their favorite chicken dinners. The collapse was catastrophic, not just for Wienerwald, but for the other chains it owned. Wienerwald had acquired IHOP and Lum's during its expansion phase, and when the parent company went bankrupt, it dragged both chains down with it. Banks granted grace periods until November 1982, then pulled the plug. Assets were liquidated, debts mounted, and the Wienerwald name disappeared from American streets. What was once a billion-dollar restaurant empire became a cautionary tale of overexpansion and financial mismanagement in less than 4 years. Winky's was a Midwestern burger chain that competed directly with McDonald's and Burger King throughout the 1970s. The chain was known for affordable burgers, crispy fries, and a cheerful mascot that welcomed families into clean, modern locations. At its peak, Winky's operated over 80 restaurants across Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and surrounding states, becoming a regional favorite for quick, affordable meals. But rising food costs, increased competition from national chains, and declining foot traffic created insurmountable financial pressure. In 1982, Winky's filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection and began closing unprofitable locations one by one. Franchisees struggled to keep their doors open as corporate support evaporated. By the mid-1980s, most Winky's locations had been sold, converted, or demolished. The few remaining franchises operated independently, but lacked the branding and support that had once made Winky's a household name. By 1990, Winky's was effectively extinct, remembered only by nostalgic customers who missed the chain's friendly service. Lum's was famous for 2 things: beer-steamed hot dogs and celebrity endorsements. Founded in Miami in 1956, the chain grew rapidly throughout the 1960s and became a favorite hangout for families and sports fans alike. At its peak, Lum's operated over 400 locations and was known for its unique cooking method, hot dogs steamed in beer, and partnerships with athletes and entertainers. But financial mismanagement and ownership changes destabilized the brand. In the late 1970s, Wienerwald purchased Lums as part of its U.S. expansion strategy. When Wienerwald filed for bankruptcy in 1982, Lums was dragged into insolvency alongside it. Locations closed rapidly, franchisees lost their investments, and the beer-steamed hot dogs that had once defined American casual dining disappeared from menus nationwide. Attempts to revive the brand in later decades failed repeatedly. Lums became a nostalgic memory, a symbol of 1960s and 1970s Americana that couldn't survive the financial collapse of the 1980s. Horn and Hardart Automat was America's first fast food chain, pioneering self-service dining in 1902. Customers inserted nickels into coin-operated machines and retrieved freshly made sandwiches, pies, and coffee from behind small glass doors. At its peak in the 1940s, Horn and Hardart operated over 80 automats in New York and Philadelphia, serving millions of meals annually. The automats were cultural landmarks, featured in films, songs, and literature as symbols of modern American efficiency. But changing tastes, rising labor costs, and the rise of traditional fast food chains like McDonald's eroded the automat's appeal. In 1981, Horn and Hardart filed for bankruptcy, closing locations rapidly. The iconic 42nd Street Automat in New York, the last remaining location, closed on April 9, 1991, ending nearly 90 years of automat history. The machines that once symbolized innovation became obsolete. The company that revolutionized American dining couldn't adapt to a changing world, and the automat disappeared forever. 5 chains down, and a pattern emerges. Overexpansion, debt, bankruptcy. Poor decisions by executives destroyed brands that families trusted for decades. Sambo's lost 1,117 locations. Wienerwald collapsed with 800 closures. Lums disappeared. Winky's vanished. But 1982 was just the beginning. 25 more chains would follow. Arthur Treacher's Fish and Chips brought British-style fried fish to American suburbs in 1969. Named after the English actor Arthur Treacher, the chain served crispy battered fish, thick-cut chips, and malt vinegar in nautical-themed restaurants. By the late 1970s, Arthur Treacher's operated over 800 locations nationwide, making it one of America's most popular seafood chains. But a series of disasters destroyed the brand. In 1978, the Icelandic cod wars disrupted fish supplies, causing prices to skyrocket and forcing menu changes that alienated loyal customers. Franchisees sued the parent company for failing to provide support, and Mrs. Pauls, the chain's owner, lost the case. In March 1982, Mrs. Pauls sold Arthur Treacher's to Lumara Foods, which filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy just 4 months later. Locations closed rapidly, and by the late 1980s, fewer than 50 restaurants remained. Today, only 2 Arthur Treacher's locations still exist, a shadow of the 800-restaurant empire that once dominated American seafood dining. Beefsteak Charlie's was New York's all-you-can-eat paradise. Founded in the 1970s, the chain became famous for unlimited salad, shrimp, beer, and wine with every steak dinner. The tagline, "I'll feed you like there's no tomorrow," resonated with budget-conscious diners, and by 1984, Beefsteak Charlie's operated 68 locations throughout the Northeast. Weekend lines stretched around the block as families packed into nautical-themed dining rooms. But the all-you-can-eat model that drove traffic also destroyed profitability. Rising food costs, especially for shrimp and beef, turned unlimited offerings into financial disasters. In 1987, Bombay Palace Restaurants acquired Beefsteak Charlie's, hoping to turn the brand around. It didn't work. Bombay Palace filed for bankruptcy just 2 years later in 1989, and only 35 Beefsteak Charlie's locations remained. Over the next 15 years, remaining restaurants closed one by one until the last location shut down in the mid-2000s. The all-you-can-eat model that made Beefsteak Charlie's famous ultimately killed it. Burger Chef was once America's second-largest burger chain, operating over 1,000 locations throughout the 1960s and 1970s. The chain pioneered the fun meal, a kid's meal with toys, years before McDonald's introduced the Happy Meal. Burger Chef competed directly with McDonald's and Burger King, offering affordable burgers, fries, and shakes in family-friendly restaurants. But corporate mismanagement, inconsistent quality, and the unsolved 1978 murders of 4 employees at a Speedway, Indiana location damaged the brand's reputation irreparably. In 1982, General Foods sold Burger Chef to Imasco, the Canadian company that also owned Hardee's, for $44 million. Imasco immediately began converting Burger Chef locations into Hardee's restaurants, erasing the Burger Chef name from signage, menus, and marketing materials. Franchisees in existing Hardee's markets were allowed to continue operating as Burger Chef temporarily, but by the mid-1980s, nearly all locations had been converted. The last Burger Chef franchise closed in 1996, ending a brand that had once rivaled McDonald's. Delete's was ahead of its time, a health-conscious fast food chain founded in 1978 that offered low-calorie burgers, grilled chicken, fresh salads, and sugar-free desserts decades before healthy eating became mainstream. By the mid-1980s, Delete's operated over 100 locations across the United States, attracting health-conscious customers who wanted fast food without the guilt. The chain marketed itself as a lighter alternative to McDonald's and Burger King, emphasizing fresh ingredients and nutrition information on every menu item. But America wasn't ready. In the 1980s, fast food customers wanted indulgence, not nutrition. Sales declined as competitors doubled down on bigger burgers, more cheese, and extra bacon. Rising costs and shrinking customer bases forced Delete's to file for bankruptcy in 1986. The company attempted to reorganize, but couldn't recover. By 1987, Delete's had collapsed entirely, with all locations closed or sold. The chain that pioneered healthy fast food disappeared just as America began caring about health, proving it was simply too early for its own good. Hot 'n Now launched in 1984 with a revolutionary concept: drive-through-only burger restaurants with rock-bottom prices. There were no dining rooms, no seating, and no indoor service, just a small building with drive-through lanes on both sides. The model kept overhead costs low, allowing Hot 'n Now to sell burgers for as little as 39 cents. The chain expanded rapidly throughout the Midwest, reaching over 150 locations in 15 states by the early 1990s. Customers loved the speed and affordability, and franchisees loved the low startup costs. But the model had fatal flaws. Drive-through-only service alienated customers who wanted to eat indoors, especially in bad weather. Quality control suffered as the chain expanded too quickly, and competition from McDonald's dollar menus undercut Hot 'n Now's pricing advantage. Locations began closing in the mid-1990s, and by the early 2000s, Hot 'n Now had nearly disappeared. A handful of locations survive today, but the once promising chain never recovered from its unsustainable expansion. Steak and ale revolutionized American dining when Norman Brinker founded it in Dallas in 1966. The chain pioneered casual dining by offering upscale steakhouse ambiance at affordable prices, introducing America's first salad bar, a concept that would define family dining for decades. The restaurants featured dark wood interiors, dim lighting, and a Tudor-style aesthetic that made customers feel sophisticated without the country club price tag. By the 1970s and early 1980s, steak and ale had become wildly successful, expanding to over 280 locations nationwide and generating hundreds of millions in annual revenue. But success attracted corporate raiders. In 1976, Pillsbury acquired Steak and Ale for $100 million. Viewing the chain as a cash cow to fund other ventures, corporate ownership stripped the brand of its founder's vision. Menu quality declined as Pillsbury prioritized profits over customer experience. Brinker left in 1976 to found Chili's, taking his innovative spirit with him. Throughout the 1980s, Steak and Ale changed hands repeatedly, sold to S&A Restaurant Corp. In 1982, then acquired by multiple investment groups that loaded the company with debt while extracting value through management fees and asset sales. Bennigan's was the Irish pub that wasn't really Irish. Founded in Atlanta in 1976, the chain became famous for green decor, Guinness on tap, Monte Cristo sandwiches, and loaded potato skins that defined 1980s appetizer culture. Bennigan's positioned itself as a fun, casual hangout for young professionals and families, with Tiffany lamps, brass railings, and a festive atmosphere that made every night feel like a celebration. By the mid-1980s, Bennigan's operated over 150 locations nationwide and was considered one of America's most popular casual dining chains. But the concept that worked in the 1980s felt tired by the 1990s. The Irish pub theme lost its novelty as competitors offered more diverse, modern atmospheres. Bennigan's menu became bloated and inconsistent, trying to appeal to everyone while satisfying no one. Ponderosa Steakhouse was America's affordable family steakhouse throughout the 1970s and 1980s, offering unlimited salad bars, baked potatoes, and budget-friendly steaks that made dining out accessible to working-class families. Founded in 1965, the chain exploded in popularity during the 1980s, reaching over 600 locations nationwide at its peak. The all-you-can-eat salad bar became legendary. Families loaded plates with lettuce, vegetables, pasta salads, and soft-serve ice cream, stretching a single steak dinner into a full-course feast. Weekend lines wrapped around buildings as families waited for tables in wood-paneled dining rooms decorated with Western-themed art. But the business model that drove traffic also destroyed profitability. Customers who came for cheap steaks stayed for unlimited food, eating far more than the restaurant could afford to serve at discount prices. Bonanza Steakhouse was founded in 1963 by Dan Blocker, the actor who played Hoss Cartwright on the hit TV series Bonanza. The Western-themed steakhouse offered affordable steaks, unlimited salad bars, and a family-friendly atmosphere that capitalized on the show's massive popularity. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Bonanza expanded aggressively, eventually operating over 300 locations across the United States. The chain competed directly with Ponderosa, Sizzler, and other budget steakhouses, attracting families who wanted steakhouse quality without steakhouse prices. But Bonanza faced the same challenges that plagued all-you-can-eat chains: rising food costs, declining per-customer profitability, and intense competition. Chi-Chi's brought Tex-Mex dining to mainstream America in 1975, offering chimichangas, fried ice cream, and tableside margaritas in festive, colorful restaurants that made every meal feel like a fiesta. Founded by Marno McDermott and NFL star Max McGee, the chain expanded rapidly throughout the 1980s and 1990s, reaching over 200 locations nationwide at its peak. Chi-Chi's became synonymous with casual Mexican dining, introducing millions of Americans to nachos, fajitas, and salsa long before Chipotle and Qdoba existed. 15 chains down. Steak and Ale invented the salad bar, then died. Bennigan's closed 150 locations overnight. Ponderosa lost 600 restaurants. Chi-Chi's killed customers with contaminated food. Every chain promised family memories. Every chain failed. The 1980s restaurant boom became the 1990s restaurant graveyard. 10 more scandals remain. York Steakhouse was a Midwest institution throughout the 1970s and 1980s, offering cafeteria-style steakhouse service, where customers selected steaks, loaded baked potatoes, and salad bar items before sitting down in wood-paneled dining rooms. Founded in Columbus, Ohio in 1966, the chain capitalized on America's love of affordable beef, expanding to over 200 locations at its peak. York Steakhouse positioned itself as a faster, cheaper alternative to traditional steakhouses. Customers could order, pay, and eat within 30 minutes, making it perfect for families on tight schedules and budgets. But the cafeteria-style service that once felt efficient began to feel cheap and outdated by the mid-1980s. Customers wanted full-service dining experiences with waiters, menus, and tableside service, not trays and self-serve counters. Beef prices throughout the 1980s squeezed profit margins, forcing York to raise prices while competitors offered better value. The chain's Midwest-heavy footprint limited growth opportunities, and attempts to expand into new markets failed to gain traction. Quality declined as corporate ownership prioritized cost-cutting over customer satisfaction. Throughout the late 1980s, York Steakhouse locations closed rapidly as leases expired and franchisees abandoned the brand. The parent company, General Mills, divested the chain in 1980, selling it to investors who lacked the resources to modernize the concept. By 1989, most York Steakhouse locations had closed permanently. Gino's Hamburgers was a Baltimore-based fast food chain founded in 1957 by Baltimore Colts football stars Gino Marchetti, Alan Ameche, and Joe Campanella. The chain grew rapidly throughout the 1960s and 1970s, eventually operating over 350 locations across the Mid-Atlantic and East Coast. Gino's competed directly with McDonald's and Burger King, offering burgers, fries, fried chicken, and shakes in orange and white restaurants that became neighborhood landmarks. The chain was particularly famous for its Gino Giant Burger and its expansion into fried chicken under the Gino's Kentucky Fried Chicken partnership with KFC. But corporate ownership changes destabilized the brand. In 1982, Marriott Corporation acquired Gino's with plans to convert all locations into Roy Rogers restaurants, Marriott's own fast food chain. The conversion happened rapidly and ruthlessly. Overnight, Gino's signage came down, Roy Rogers signs went up, and menus changed entirely. Loyal customers who had visited Gino's for decades suddenly found their favorite burgers replaced with roast beef sandwiches and fried chicken. Franchisees had no choice but to comply or close. The conversion erased Gino's from American culture almost instantly. By 1983, every Gino's location had been rebranded or closed, ending 25 years of regional burger chain dominance. Customers protested the loss, but Marriott moved forward regardless, prioritizing Roy Rogers' expansion over nostalgic loyalty. The football heroes who had founded Gino's watched as their legacy disappeared beneath Roy Rogers' branding. Burger Queen was founded in Winter Haven, Florida, in 1956, offering flame-broiled burgers in direct competition with Burger King and McDonald's. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, the chain expanded throughout the southeastern United States, eventually operating over 200 locations. Burger Queen's signature item was the Big Chef Burger, a double-decker burger that predated McDonald's Big Mac by several years. The chain also introduced breakfast service earlier than many competitors, positioning itself as an innovative alternative to national chains. But trademark disputes and branding confusion plagued Burger Queen throughout the 1970s. Burger King repeatedly sued Burger Queen for trademark infringement, arguing that the names were too similar and caused customer confusion. In 1981, Burger Queen rebranded as Druther's to avoid ongoing legal battles and to create a distinct identity. The new name came from the slogan, "I'd druther go to Druther's," emphasizing customer preference and choice. The rebranding was expensive and disruptive, requiring new signage, marketing campaigns, and menu redesigns across hundreds of locations. Unfortunately, the Druther's name never gained the recognition or loyalty that Burger Queen had built over 25 years. Customers didn't understand the new branding, and the awkward name felt forced and unnatural. Throughout the 1980s, Druther's struggled to compete against McDonald's, Burger King, and emerging regional chains like Hardee's and Wendy's. Locations closed steadily, and by the early 1990s, most Druther's restaurants had shut down permanently. Wetson's was a New York area burger chain that competed directly with McDonald's throughout the 1960s and 1970s. Founded in 1959, the chain expanded rapidly across New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, eventually operating over 70 locations. Wetson's was known for affordable 15-cent hamburgers, crispy fries, and efficient service that rivaled McDonald's speed and quality. The chain's mascot, Wetson's Willie, appeared in local advertising campaigns, and the bright yellow and red color scheme made Wetson's restaurants instantly recognizable in suburban shopping centers and highway rest stops. But Wetson's struggled to expand beyond its regional footprint. While McDonald's invested billions in national advertising, real estate acquisitions, and franchising infrastructure, Wetson's remained a small, undercapitalized regional chain. Rising beef and labor costs throughout the 1970s squeezed profit margins, forcing Wetson's to raise prices, while competitors leveraged economies of scale to keep prices low. The chain's New York area concentration made it vulnerable to regional economic downturns, and when the 1970s recession hit the Northeast particularly hard, Wetson's traffic declined sharply. Throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s, Wetson's locations closed one by one as leases expired and franchisees gave up. Attempts to sell the chain or attract investors failed. McDonald's and Burger King had already dominated the fast food landscape, leaving little room for regional competitors. By the early 1980s, Wetson's had effectively disappeared. Red Barn was one of America's most distinctive fast food chains, instantly recognizable for its red barn-shaped restaurants, topped with silo-shaped cupolas. Founded in Springfield, Ohio in 1961, the chain expanded rapidly throughout the 1960s and 1970s, eventually operating over 400 locations across the United States and Canada. Red Barn served burgers, fried chicken, and fish sandwiches in brightly painted barn-shaped buildings that stood out along highways and in suburban shopping centers. The chain's Big Barney burger competed directly with McDonald's Big Mac, offering a double-decker burger years before McDonald's introduced its signature sandwich. But Red Barn's expansion outpaced its operational capacity. Quality control suffered as the chain grew too quickly, and inconsistent food quality damaged the brand's reputation. Franchisees operated with minimal corporate oversight, leading to wildly different customer experiences across locations. Rising costs and increased competition from McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's squeezed Red Barn's already thin profit margins. The barn-shaped buildings that once attracted attention became expensive liabilities. The unique architecture cost significantly more to build and maintain than standard rectangular fast food restaurants. Throughout the 1970s, Red Barn changed ownership multiple times, destabilizing the brand and draining resources. Locations closed steadily, and by the early 1980s, most Red Barn restaurants had shut down permanently. 20 chains vanished. York Steakhouse, Gino's, Wetson's, Red Barn, all gone. Corporate buyouts, rebranding failures, overexpansion. Every chain believed it was invincible. Every chain was wrong. The restaurants that defined American dining disappeared silently, leaving empty buildings and faded signs. 10 more failures remain to uncover. Rustler Steakhouse was a family-friendly steakhouse chain that peaked during the 1970s and early 1980s, offering affordable steaks, all-you-can-eat salad bars, and Western-themed decor that appealed to middle-class families seeking casual dining experiences. Founded in the 1960s, Rustler competed directly with Ponderosa, Bonanza, and Sizzler in the crowded budget steakhouse market. The chain operated dozens of locations primarily throughout the Midwest and South, featuring wood-paneled interiors, wagon wheel chandeliers, and waitresses in Western-style uniforms that reinforced the frontier dining theme. Rustler's business model relied on volume, serving large numbers of customers affordable steaks with unlimited salad bar access. The strategy worked well during the prosperous 1970s when families had disposable income for weekly restaurant visits. Weekend dinner rushes filled every table as families loaded plates with iceberg lettuce, croutons, ranch dressing, and soft-serve ice cream. The all-you-can-eat promise attracted budget-conscious diners who viewed unlimited salad bars as exceptional value, especially when children could eat their fill for minimal cost. But the same factors that drove Rustler's success in the 1970s destroyed it in the 1980s. Rising beef prices throughout the decade squeezed profit margins dramatically. The budget steakhouse model depended on cheap beef, and when prices doubled, Rustler couldn't raise menu prices without alienating price-sensitive customers. The all-you-can-eat salad bars that attracted families also encouraged customers to minimize meat consumption and maximize salad bar visits, reducing per-customer profitability. Food costs rose while revenue stagnated, creating an unsustainable financial situation. Additionally, consumer preferences shifted dramatically during the 1980s. Families began favoring lighter, more diverse cuisines over heavy steak dinners. Italian chains like Olive Garden and Mexican restaurants like Chi-Chi's offered variety and freshness that steak and potato menus couldn't match. The Western theme that once felt wholesome and American began to seem dated and kitschy as dining trends moved toward contemporary designs and international flavors. Throughout the 1980s, Rustler Steakhouse locations closed quietly as leases expired. Franchisees walked away. By the late 1980s, Rustler Steakhouse had effectively disappeared from American dining. Victoria Station was one of the most unique restaurant concepts of the 1970s, a steakhouse chain where customers dined inside actual railroad cars. Founded in San Francisco in 1969, the chain acquired vintage railroad dining cars, boxcars, and cabooses, then converted them into upscale restaurants serving prime rib, steaks, and seafood. The Victorian-era railroad theme extended throughout the entire dining experience, with conductors' uniforms for staff, brass fixtures, vintage luggage as decor, and authentic railroad memorabilia covering the walls. At its peak in the early 1980s, Victoria Station operated over 100 locations across the United States and internationally, becoming a destination restaurant where the atmosphere rivaled the food. The railroad car concept created immediate visual impact and novelty. Customers loved dining inside authentic train cars, exploring different cars between courses, and experiencing the romance of Victorian-era rail travel without leaving their hometowns. As the chain expanded, finding suitable railroad cars became increasingly difficult and expensive, forcing some locations to use replica cars that lacked authenticity and disappointed customers expecting genuine vintage equipment. Financial problems emerged in the mid-1980s as the novelty wore off, and customers stopped visiting as frequently. The upscale positioning that differentiated Victoria Station in the 1970s became a liability during the economic uncertainty of the early 1980s recession. Customers cut back on expensive steakhouse dinners, and Victoria Station's higher prices couldn't compete with emerging casual dining chains offering better value. Corporate debt from rapid expansion crushed the company's finances. In 1986, Victoria Station filed for bankruptcy protection, and most locations closed immediately. A few franchise locations survived independently into the early 1990s, but by the mid-1990s, Victoria Station had completely disappeared. The railroad cars were sold, demolished, or abandoned. The chain that pioneered experiential dining and brought Victorian railroad romance to American suburbs couldn't overcome the operational costs and changing consumer preferences that made the concept unsustainable. Tad's Steaks pioneered the budget steakhouse concept in New York City in 1957, offering broiled steaks, baked potatoes, and garlic bread for under $2 at a time when most steakhouses charged $10 or more. The cafeteria-style service kept costs low. Customers ordered at a counter, watched their steaks broil on open flames, then carried trays to communal tables in no-frills dining rooms. The concept appealed to working-class New Yorkers, tourists, and anyone seeking affordable steak dinners in Manhattan, where dining out by the 1970s and 1980s, Tad's operated dozens of locations throughout New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, serving thousands of budget steaks daily to crowds who lined up outside doorways during lunch and dinner rushes. Tad's success came from ruthless cost control and operational efficiency. The limited menu, steak, potato, bread, salad, minimized food waste and kitchen complexity. The cafeteria-style service eliminated waitstaff costs. The no-frills atmosphere meant minimal decor expenses. Tad's squeezed maximum profit from minimal prices by operating with precision and discipline. The chain became a New York institution, featured in guidebooks as an authentic, affordable dining experience where tourists could eat steak in Manhattan without spending $50. But the very factors that made Tad's successful in earlier decades became liabilities by the late 1980s and 1990s. The cafeteria-style service that once felt efficient began to feel cheap and impersonal compared to full-service casual dining chains. The budget positioning that attracted working-class diners made Tad's seem low quality compared to upscale steakhouses and trendy new restaurants. Rising Manhattan real estate costs made it increasingly difficult to operate budget restaurants in prime locations. Landlords could charge premium rents to higher-end establishments, squeezing Tad's out of desirable neighborhoods. Additionally, fast casual chains and improved fast food offerings provided comparable value with better service and more comfortable atmospheres. Customers who once tolerated communal tables and cafeteria trays now expected individual seating and table service, even at budget prices. Quality concerns also plagued Tad's. Some customers complained that the budget steaks were tough, overcooked, or poor quality, damaging the brand's reputation. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, most Tad's locations closed as leases expired and the economics no longer worked. Today, only a handful of Tad's locations survive, operating primarily as nostalgic holdouts, serving New York's dwindling population of budget steak seekers. The chain that once revolutionized affordable steak dining now exists as a relic of a different era when efficiency and low prices mattered more than ambiance and experience. Rax Roast Beef was founded in Springfield, Ohio in 1967 as a direct competitor to Arby's, offering roast beef sandwiches, curly fries, and an all-you-can-eat salad bar in fast food restaurants throughout the Midwest and South. The chain differentiated itself from Arby's by emphasizing quality ingredients, larger sandwich portions, and more upscale restaurant designs featuring salad bars, sunrooms with skylights, and table service options that blurred the line between fast food and casual dining. Throughout the 1980s, Rax experienced explosive growth, expanding from 10 locations in 1978 to over 504 locations by 1986, making it one of America's fastest-growing restaurant chains. The expansion was fueled by aggressive franchising and innovative menu additions that kept Rax ahead of competitors. The chain introduced all-you-can-eat salad bars in fast food settings years before competitors copied the concept. Rax added baked potatoes, pasta salad bars, Mexican bars with taco fixings, and even Chinese food stations in some locations, transforming simple roast beef restaurants into buffet-style dining destinations. The strategy worked brilliantly in the mid-1980s, attracting families who wanted variety and value in fast food settings. Rax became particularly popular in smaller Midwestern towns where dining options were limited and the salad bar represented affordable luxury. But the rapid expansion proved unsustainable and strategically disastrous. Rax overextended geographically, opening locations in markets where roast beef sandwiches weren't popular and where brand recognition was minimal. The diverse menu offerings that initially attracted customers became operationally complex and expensive to maintain. Salad bars required constant restocking, monitoring, and food safety compliance, significantly increasing labor costs compared to traditional fast food operations. Food waste from salad bars and buffet stations eroded profit margins. Quality control suffered as franchisees struggled to maintain standards across hundreds of locations. Financial problems mounted rapidly in the late 1980s. Rax filed for bankruptcy protection in 1992, closing hundreds of locations and selling others to franchisees who rebranded them as independent restaurants. The company reorganized multiple times, but never recovered its 1980s momentum. Mr. Steak, 1962, late 1980s. Mr. Steak was a Colorado-based steakhouse chain founded in 1962 that pioneered family-friendly steakhouse dining decades before chains like Outback Steakhouse popularized the concept nationally. The chain offered quality steaks, prime rib, and seafood at moderate prices in casual Western-themed restaurants that appealed to middle-class families throughout the Rocky Mountain region and beyond. At its peak in the 1970s and early 1980s, Mr. Steak operated over 270 locations across the United States, establishing itself as a regional powerhouse that competed successfully against national chains like Bonanza and Ponderosa. Mr. Steak's success came from its focus on quality over quantity. Unlike budget steakhouses that served cheap cuts to maximize value, Mr. Steak emphasized USDA choice beef hand-cut steaks, and proper cooking techniques that delivered consistently good meals. The Western decor, leather booths, wood paneling, landscape paintings of mountains and cattle, created warm, inviting atmospheres where families felt comfortable celebrating special occasions without the stuffiness or expense of upscale steakhouses. The chain also introduced salad bars earlier than most competitors, recognizing that families valued variety and unlimited offerings alongside their steaks. But Mr. Steak faced mounting challenges throughout the 1980s that eventually destroyed the chain. The steakhouse market became oversaturated as dozens of regional and national chains competed for the same customers that felt adult and contemporary. Throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s, Hoolihan's expanded aggressively, operating over 100 locations nationwide and establishing itself as a leader in the emerging casual dining category. The chain's early success came from understanding demographic shifts. As baby boomers entered their prime earning years, they sought restaurants that offered more sophistication than fast food or family diners, but remained more affordable and casual than traditional fine dining. Hoolihan's filled that niche perfectly, offering eclectic menus with appetizers like potato skins and buffalo wings, alongside entrees like steak, seafood, and pasta. The bar areas attracted after-work crowds, and the dining rooms accommodated date nights and business lunches. The formula worked brilliantly throughout the early 1980s as the chain became synonymous with upscale casual dining. But Hoolihan's faced intensifying competition as the casual dining category exploded throughout the mid-1980s and 1990s. Applebee's, Chili's, TGI Fridays, and dozens of other chains copied Hoolihan's formula while adding their own twists, flooding the market with nearly identical concepts competing for the same customers. Hoolihan's early mover advantage disappeared as competitors outspent it on advertising, real estate acquisitions, and menu innovation. The chain that once felt cutting edge began to seem generic and undifferentiated compared to flashier, better-funded competitors. Ownership changes throughout the 1980s and 1990s destabilized Hoolihan's strategic direction. Different corporate owners pursued conflicting visions. Some emphasized upscale positioning, others pushed value pricing, and still others experimented with menu diversification. The inconsistency confused customers and franchisees alike. Locations closed steadily throughout the 1990s and 2000s as the chain shrank from over 100 restaurants to fewer than 40 today. Hoolihan's survived where many competitors died, but the chain never recovered its 1980s prominence or profitability. Multiple bankruptcy threats, ownership changes, and restructuring efforts kept Hoolihan's alive but diminished. Today, the remaining locations operate as shadows of the trendy, innovative restaurants that once defined upscale casual dining for a generation of young professionals. Hoolihan's pioneered the category, then watched as better capitalized competitors perfected the formula and dominated the market it created. Ground Round was founded in 1969 by Howard Johnson's as a casual family restaurant concept, emphasizing affordable burgers, pay-what-you-weigh popcorn, free peanuts in shells, with shells thrown on floors, and family-friendly atmospheres that encouraged kids to make noise and have fun. The concept deliberately contrasted with formal dining. Ground Round celebrated casual, messy, boisterous family meals where children could be children without disapproving stares from other diners. Silent movies played on screens, peanut shells crunched underfoot, and servers encouraged kids to order from extensive children's menus featuring burgers, hot dogs, and chicken fingers. At its peak in the 1980s, Ground Round operated over 200 locations throughout the United States. becoming a family dining destination particularly popular for birthday parties and weekend dinners. The ground round formula worked exceptionally well during the 1970s and 1980s, when families with young children represented a massive market segment. Baby boomer parents appreciated restaurants where their kids could be loud and messy without judgment. The pay-what-you-weigh popcorn, customers paid based on how much their bag of popcorn weighed, became a beloved gimmick that entertained children and created memorable experiences. The peanut shells on floors reinforced the casual, anything-goes atmosphere that differentiated Ground Round from more formal family restaurants. Birthday parties at Ground Round became childhood traditions for millions of 1980s kids, but the concept that thrived in the 1980s struggled in subsequent decades as demographic and cultural shifts changed family dining preferences. Declining birth rates meant fewer families with young children. Parents became more health-conscious, questioning whether restaurants that encouraged kids to eat unlimited peanuts and popcorn before meals promoted healthy eating habits. Peanut allergies became more common and more serious, creating liability concerns around restaurants where peanut shells covered floors. The messy, noisy atmosphere that once felt liberating began to feel chaotic and unsanitary to some customers. Corporate ownership changes throughout the 1990s destabilized Ground Round further. Howard Johnson's sold the chain in 1987, beginning a series of ownership transfers that saw Ground Round change hands multiple times over 2 decades. Each new owner pursued different strategies, creating inconsistency and confusion. The chain filed for bankruptcy in 2004, emerging with fewer locations and reduced market presence. Another bankruptcy followed in 2012. Howard Johnson's was once America's largest restaurant chain, operating over 1,000 locations and becoming synonymous with family road trips, orange roofs, and 28 flavors of ice cream. Founded in 1925, Hojo's, as it was affectionately known, dominated American highway dining from the 1950s through the 1970s, offering consistent quality, familiar menus, and reliable service at locations from coast to coast. The chain pioneered franchising, standardized operations, and highway-adjacent real estate strategies that later companies like McDonald's perfected. Howard Johnson's restaurants sat beside Howard Johnson's motor lodges, creating integrated travel experiences where families could eat, sleep, and continue their journeys, knowing exactly what to expect at every location. But Howard Johnson's dominance collapsed dramatically during the 1980s as fast food, casual dining, and changing travel patterns destroyed the highway restaurant model. Interstate highways increasingly bypassed older routes where Howard Johnson's locations sat, stranding restaurants that once enjoyed steady traffic flows. Fast food chains offered quicker service and cheaper prices, appealing to travelers prioritizing speed over sit-down meals. Casual dining chains like Applebee's and Chili's offered more diverse menus and contemporary atmospheres that made Howard Johnson's feel dated and obsolete. The orange roofs and turquoise color schemes that once signaled modernity began to look tired and old-fashioned. Corporate ownership changes accelerated the decline. Marriott acquired Howard Johnson's in 1985, then immediately began selling off restaurants and focusing resources on the more profitable motor lodge business. Prime locations were sold to competitors or converted to other brands. Underperforming restaurants closed permanently. The company that had once operated over 1,000 restaurants shrank to fewer than 200 by the early 1990s. Subsequent ownership transfers continued the downward spiral as new owners extracted value while investing minimal resources in modernization or brand revitalization. Orange Julius was founded in Los Angeles in 1926 when Julius Freed developed a frothy orange drink that became an instant sensation. The secret formula: orange juice, sweetener, milk, egg whites, ice, and vanilla, was blended into a smooth, creamy beverage unlike anything customers had tasted before. The drink's popularity spawned standalone Orange Julius stores throughout shopping malls, boardwalks, and high-traffic retail locations across America. By the 1970s and 1980s, Orange Julius operated hundreds of locations, becoming the go-to refreshment stop for mall shoppers seeking cold drinks, hot dogs, and the signature orange beverage that generations of Americans grew up drinking. Orange Julius locations became iconic fixtures in American shopping malls during the 1980s, when indoor malls represented the epicenter of American retail and social life. Teenagers hung out at malls on weekends, families shopped at anchor department stores, and everyone stopped at Orange Julius for drinks between stores. The standalone kiosks, positioned in high-traffic mall corridors, maximized visibility and impulse purchases. The simple menu, mostly beverages and a few food items like hot dogs and nachos, kept operations efficient and labor costs low. Orange Julius became synonymous with mall culture, representing a generation's memories of shopping, socializing, and drinking frothy orange beverages. But two major shifts destroyed Orange Julius's standalone business model during the 1990s and 2000s. First, American mall culture collapsed as online shopping, big-box retailers, and lifestyle shopping centers replaced traditional enclosed malls. As anchor stores closed and mall traffic declined, Orange Julius locations lost customers. Many malls died entirely, leaving Orange Julius kiosks in empty corridors serving no one. Shakey's Pizza Parlor was founded in Sacramento in 1954 by Sherwood Shakey Johnson and Ed Plummer, creating one of America's first pizza chains and pioneering the pizza parlor concept years before Pizza Hut and Domino's dominated the market. Shakey's featured live ragtime piano music, Dixieland jazz bands, silent movie screenings, and family-friendly atmospheres that made pizza dining an entertainment experience rather than just a meal. The chain's bunch of lunch buffet, all-you-can-eat pizza, fried chicken, and salad, became legendary, attracting families who spent entire afternoons eating, watching movies, and listening to music in festive, boisterous dining rooms. By the early 1980s, Shakey's operated over 500 locations throughout the United States and internationally, making it one of the world's largest pizza chains. Shakey's success came from creating destination dining experiences that transcended food quality. Families visited Shakey's for birthday parties, Little League celebrations, and weekend entertainment, drawn by the live music, silent movies, and unlimited pizza buffets that kept kids entertained for hours. The pizza parlor concept, loud, crowded, fun-focused restaurants where noise and chaos were expected and encouraged, differentiated Shakey's from quieter, more conventional restaurants. The Bunch of Lunch buffet offered unbeatable value for large families, where parents paid once and children ate until they couldn't eat anymore. But Shakey's faced devastating competition during the 1980s and 1990s as pizza delivery chains. Shakey's legacy lives on in the pizza buffet concept and in the memories of families who celebrated birthdays, surrounded by ragtime music, silent movies, and unlimited pizza. Conclusion: 30 restaurant chains, thousands of locations, millions of jobs, all vanished between 1982 and the end of the 1980s. Sambo's closed 1,117 restaurants in a single year. Wienerwald collapsed with 800 locations. Howard Johnson's shrank from 1,000 restaurants to nearly zero. Burger Chef, Arthur Treacher's, Beefsteak Charlie's, Chi-Chi's, Every chain that defined American dining disappeared, leaving empty buildings and faded memories. These weren't just business failures, they were childhood traditions erased. Birthday parties that would never happen again. Weekend family dinners that became impossible when the restaurant closed overnight. The smell of Shakey's pizza parlor, the taste of Burger Chef's fun meal, the all-you-can-eat salad bar at Ponderosa, the railroad cars at Victoria Station, all gone. The scandals were buried. The bankruptcies happened quietly. Most people never knew why their favorite restaurants vanished. Corporate mismanagement, overexpansion, debt, changing tastes. Every chain believed it was invincible. Every chain was wrong. Today, a few survivors cling to existence. Shakey's with 60 locations, Rax with single digits, a handful of Tads and Orange Julius holdouts. But the empires are gone. The 1980s promised endless growth and prosperity. The reality delivered closures, layoffs, and lost memories. What's hiding in today's restaurant chains? Which beloved brands will vanish next? The cycle never stops. The closures never end.